Hey everyone, welcome back to Highly Unlikely with Josh and Jenaye. Part 2 of expanding the tension at the table, really just kind of our special holiday episodes, all rooted out of a message we did together end of November. We'll link that in the show notes. You can go and listen to that. We're going to not reference a ton of things we covered in there. And so if some things you think we're skipping or missing context, you're actually at like part 3. Mm-hmm. So there's a message to listen to from Sunday. There is last week's episode to listen to, and then that really equips you for kind of what we're delving in here. So let's try not to give a ton of backstory.
Yeah, we gave a lot of introductory thoughts last week. So we're going to kind of jump right in on this one to the tension of when new seats are added to the table. Maybe somebody gets married, a spouse comes in, somebody gets divorced, and somebody leaves, or a girlfriend or boyfriend shows up at the holiday, or kids, grandchildren are added, and just how does that change the different tensions, especially, again, we're talking pretty generationally here, between parents like us who have children and also adult parents that are still living, but just how do all these interactions affect one another? And can we interact in a way that is true to who we are and our convictions while also experiencing tension but not breaking relationship?
Yeah, because Jesus navigated tension. He did not sin. and he did it. So we follow his example. So we're really going to dive into our last 2 tensions, which are the tension of adding new seats to the table and the tension of the table talk. So they kind of intertwine in both, so we're going to go in and out of it. But with adding new seats to the table, that is, when children are added, grandchildren, that could be when spouses are added. That could be someone gets married for the first time. That could be that a divorce has taken place. Someone gets remarried. It could be that you have a grandparent, you lost a grandparent, and that grandparent got remarried. There's so many ways where a seat is added to the table, and that brings a lot of different tensions and emotions. Where do you want to start, babe?
I kind of want to start with, I like to give these funny quotes from Jim Burns, and this one kind of lines up, but it doesn't totally. But he says, be nice to your adult children. They will most likely be the ones who someday take away your car keys and usher you into the convalescent. Is that how you say it?
Convalescent care facility.
Care facility.
Yeah.
So there's a thought. I just think that's really funny because it might be coming for all of us, you know?
And again, we are referencing this book by Jim Burns. It's going to be in the show notes. It is a beautiful, beautiful resource, not just around the holidays, but navigating life as adult to adult, where it was parent to child, and now the relationship is adult to adult. And we know that there's families where you have the grandparent generation, you have the parent generation, and now your kids are turning 18 and they're really in their 18 to early 20s. And there's 3 generations to navigate that they're all adults now. Yeah. And like we were just talking about, like you have a niece and a nephew now. It's like, okay, you're adults in this. I need to shift of viewing you as a kid. Yeah.
You don't get Christmas presents from us anymore. You're an adult now. We were just having
that conversation. We're like, well, they're an adult. Like, do they still get like the little nieces and nephews? And I was like, well, my family, when you're an 18, you aged out. Like you didn't get that anymore. So we were just talking about that.
I was thinking about, I referenced a verse in church in the message from 1 Corinthians 7 that talks about when you're married, your attention is divided, but when you're not married, you can be dedicated to God, both in your body and in your spirit and in your work. But somebody who's married is concerned about the concerns of the world and their family. And so part of this conversation is if you have children that are now adults and they've gotten married or had their own family, they really have a different calling than when they were children living in your home.
Right.
They have a calling now to that immediate family that they've started, and that has to be number one in their lives. It'd be inappropriate for your immediate family to remain their number one calling.
And priority and at the forefront of their mind. I
remember I think I can share this. I don't think you'd care, but my little brother was going to get a tattoo and he wanted to put all the names of like our immediate family, and we were talking about it. And I just thought, are you sure you want to do that? Because you're going to have your own family. And do you really want like my name on you, or do you want to put your own family in there? And it just really is kind of this picture of like, that tension.
And depending on what your family of origin has been, there are some families that champion that. They're like, hey, when you get married, like the cord is cut from our family. Like your priority, your number one is your spouse and your nuclear family that you're fostering, that you are, stewarding. Mm-hmm. And there are some. There's many different family cultures you can grow up in, and there's just different cultures based off of even ethnicity, where maybe there's a lot more interdependence in like family lives together, things like that. There's so many different cultures, and we can't cover them all. But you could also come from a family of origin that it's like no, you're loyal to your family of origin no matter what. And I have seen those families where the person who marries in is kind of the outcast, it's kind of the odd one out. And it's like, well, no, we're family. Like we have the inside jokes. And
that's one of the tensions he talks about in the book is when you force your child to choose between your immediate family or the family of origin and the family that they've now married into, when it's not like, hey, we'll work together, but you're forcing a choice.
He even talks about and gives stories of like, hey, there's the reality that you may not like the person that your child chose to marry. You may not like your daughter-in-law or son-in-law. Well, deal with it. And this is how you deal with it. And it's not changing them. It's not convincing them, out of it. It's loving them and finding ways to love them. But I'm going to share really quick. We meant to share this in the message, had to cut it. 5 tips to navigate the relationship, which is focusing on in-laws, step-families, and the blend. And it's interesting. He says, as we work through the 5 tips that follow, keep in mind the principle of this chapter is wear beige and keep your mouth shut. I just love that. It effectively summarizes the best approach to navigating and improving a relationship with an in-law.
I think we do need to say, like, this guy has adult grown children with their own families. And so he's writing from that perspective.
Yeah. So he says, before I react or speak to an in-law, I like to ask myself this question. Will what I'm about to say or do improve the relationship? Don't make it about you. Make it about the health of the relationship. And so the following tips will help. Number 1, don't make your child choose between you and their new family. So I think of, around the holidays, it's like, well, this is our year to do this. Our family's doing this. And you say our family is like, well, who's our? Mm-hmm. You're saying you're deeming your family's doing that. And so even as your child is now an adult saying, hey, our family's planning on doing this. What's your family planning on doing? So just saying, our family always does Christmas Day. Okay, well, that's just different, So now they're married. Maybe they married into a family where their family always does Christmas Day. How can you find a win-win for the whole family as a whole? And there are some people that they want their tradition to be their tradition, and so much to where, and if this is their choice, then you need to be okay with it. But to where they'll maybe just be them two or them alone on that day, but they got to open their gift on that day. Well, if that matters so much to them, then that's okay.
You said a really good thing in the message.
Yeah.
Where you
navigating
talked about,
for a win-win. That's in here.
Well, is that like with the prize?
Yeah. That's the last point.
Okay,
I'll get to it.
I'll let you get to it.
Number 2, don't complain. The point, it says, at least 25% of parents end up living with their children sometime during their aging years. Complaints and criticisms may force your children to choose between you or themselves, and invariably, you will be the one aced out of the relationship. Constant complaints and criticisms of your in-law will jeopardize your relationship. Be careful with your comments and quick to overlook minor offenses or slights. Oh, my goodness. Okay, number 3, don't stub your toe on old family issues. Put the past where it belongs in the past. Mend the relationship if it needs mending. Too many families are still at war over an offense that happened years before. Number 4, offer support. If your adult child's marriage is struggling or fails, provide support. If you live in the area and your grandchildren needs a babysitter, be the first to offer. You honor your child and your in-law when you are their chief cheerleader. Be there for them. Mm-hmm. Number 5, negotiate the holidays for a win-win. And this was the point that I shared. So it's interesting. I'm going to share his story he shares, and then I'm going to share what I shared. But he says, when we were first married, Kathy and I always struggled with where to spend the holidays. We wanted to celebrate with our extended families, but they didn't live close because we had children. We also wanted to create our own family holiday traditions. That is the number one question we get from parents in their 20s and 30s that are like, yeah, I get I've always done Christmas Day with my parents, but I want to, like, I started that with my parents at some point in my childhood. When do I get to start my traditions with my kids? So biggest question that people have.
I think just a really interesting thing to think about is so many people are working towards being 60, having the retirement, the big house, the big dining room table to be able to host their whole family, and that be the dream. And then you get there and you have the house, you have the dining room, you have the capacity, you have the time and energy.
And you have the money to like buy all the food.
To do it, and nobody wants to come to your house. And I think that's like a very real tension.
That's
for
hard.
people who have reached that season of life. That's really difficult. So maybe for some of us that are younger, we need to think about, man, when I get to 55 or 60 or 65, what is the best way to create a table for my family, even if it's not the physical table of wherever my home is, because maybe their home is going to be far away.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's just, you have to ask yourself a different question.
Yeah. And we've watched so many families do it so different, you know, and a great podcast, far better than ours. On this is called Intentional Parent, the Intentional Parents podcast. And it's a parent couple and then their daughter and their son-in-law. And like, there was one episode where they talked about how they had to have a hard conversation about the holidays. And they're like, this is real. This is real life. And the grandparent, the dad being like, I was frustrated that we always do it this way. You know, we always meet up and that's just can't be the reality for this family this year, you know? And so it's just cool.
One of the great examples I've seen, and not all of us will have the capacity to do it this way, but there's a guy named Lee DeMine who, every year after Christmas, their whole family travels somewhere together, and he and his wife pay for it and offer it to their children. And they've taught their kids how to do like family mapping, like planning out your year, planning out your goals, planning out your dreams.
Wow.
And they've been intentional about creating a table, even if it's not the table at their house, and helping their family get there. And that doesn't have to be that you fly your whole family to Colorado. It can be that you meet somewhere central,
right?
You know, where everybody can get to. If they want to. And then they make it a value add for their kids by supporting them, by paying for stuff, by opening doors of opportunity. And I just noticed the other day, I was following him on Instagram and I saw he posted a picture of his son who's now become a surgeon. And I went back to his son's profile, and in one of the pictures, he has a picture with his dad. And I thought, wow, that's win number one. This son posted a picture with his dad.
Wow.
I read the caption, and that was win number 2. It said, I'm half the man my dad is.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, kid, that's the goal. Like, beyond getting everybody together for the holidays, that is the goal.
Oh, yes. And we can get so nearsighted on like whether you get the holiday or what, like, and it's like, it's whatever, 2 days, 3 days a year. And if family and time together is the goal, then let's keep that. Let's be mature about that. And let's keep that at the forefront. And yeah, we have, there are so many different scenarios. And I think, again, we can only represent people, our age demographic, and what we have experienced. And I know we have people in our season of life that have said like how their families or parents have gone above and beyond, especially if they have young kids. They are like, hey, I want to make it the easiest possible for you to come. Okay, what kind of pack and play would you want me to get? Hey, how would you want me to have this set up for you? How, like, and prevent any barriers from their kids coming. But it's more of, hey, how can I foster and curate this for you and your kids? It's not, just from a parent's perspective, it's not fun to bring your kids to a place that is filled with things that your children could die with. Like, it's so not child-proofed. Like, it's just like, you walk away and you're like, my head hurts. My body hurts from chasing my toddler. This is not fun. I was stressed the whole time because I thought you were going to ruin every part of this person's house, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just not, like, so I think those are things to keep in mind. And I know we've heard people like that, like, oh gosh, it's just way too stressful to travel with our kids. But because we have our rhythms, we know our house is like child-proofed, and it's easier. So
you were talking about the win-win, I think.
Win-win, negotiate for the win-win. He said, They wanted to be with their extended families, but they didn't live close. Because we had children, we also wanted to create our own family holiday traditions. There were times when juggling the holidays felt more like a burden than a joy. We decided that as our adult children got married, we would never pressure them to participate in our celebrations, and we would try to make their holidays as easy as possible. The first year after our oldest daughter was married, she let us know that she would be having Thanksgiving with her in-laws. Frankly, even though we had decided to not make the holidays stressful, it was a bit difficult. Then I had an idea. How about celebrating Thanksgiving with our family on the Sunday before, I asked. That way you can connect with both families. She jumped at the chance for a family gathering on a separate day. We had a great time, and then on the day of Thanksgiving, we drove out to Palm Springs for a few days with one of our other daughters. It became a win-win. And so really what he means with win-win is like just a win for both. And so it's a win if time as a family is the prize. Like if being with your children and your grandchildren is the prize, then let's keep that at the forefront, of that. So
yeah.
If
that happens with our kids, we're going to celebrate early and then we're going to the beach.
I think that's the other thing is we are in, and I call it the product of the 50%.
Yeah.
I reference that in the message. I am the product of the 50%, the divorce rate. I'm a child from a family of divorce, a blended family, remarried on both sides. Mine's unique that both the people that my parents remarried to both have lost their spouses.
Right.
So that's actually very unique because even their children, they really have their in-laws and they have their parent. Where my brother and I, we have my parents, both sides. I have 3 families. It's not an every other year rotation for me. It's every 3 years.
Yep.
If I'm dividing things evenly. So there's a lot of people navigating that. It's not as simple as your family, my family. I know of people that thankfully have all their family in town, and they've submitted to me that that's actually harder, that they have to be in someone where both sides, her and her husband, they have divorced parents on both sides. They have 4 families to hit in one town. Yeah. And then they're running to 4 places in one day and running ragged. And so where was I going to go with that? I was going down the whole blended product of divorce. I think that is a part you talked about in the last episode of some adult children are really withdrawing or shutting out their parents. If it is a child that is a product of the 50%, a product of divorce, I do think some are shutting out or using boundaries. Some do boundaries well. Some use it to create distance, but to relieve the burden.
Yeah,
that they
let's
feel.
just play it out. I mean, just our example, not because we're victims of it or because we're mad at our families about it, but
I will say if we use any of our personal experience, ours is unique because we always have 7 services on Christmas Eve.
But we accommodate it anyways. I mean, so I just think about it this way. I think, okay, if we want to hit my family and Jenaye's mom and Jenaye's dad and their families, and everybody wants to be close to Christmas, my family is already adapted to, we do Christmas Eve after Christmas Eve services.
At our house, which was a sacrifice for your family.
Yeah, we used to travel out to my parents, but by the time we got out there, it's like 7 or 7:30 p.m.
Well, for us, this is a good example. We would go out to your parents' house Christmas Eve. It got to the point, that was fine before we had kids. Fine with one kid. We can make it work. But then we started having to do 6 services, sometimes 7 services. We're getting done with services after a full day. You're preaching all of them. At 6, takes an hour 15 to get to your parents' house. We're getting there. We're like zombies, and then we were pretty strict bedtime people. And we just got to this point where we said, hey, if you guys are willing, we're more than willing to host. And some years we just said, hey, we're going to stay, and we'd order Kobe's because I was like, I'm not going to cook.
Yeah. Let's just to play it out. If we did Christmas Eve with my family, and we're trying to hit everybody, then by Christmas morning, we're having to try to make it across the state, or to the northeast part of the state. Yeah. And then by dinner, Christmas night, trying to get a couple hours back to the other family. And when I just think about that, I think, what did my kids experience for Christmas?
Well, they could have had fun. I think you're pretty removed when you're 6.
Yeah.
I would say, what parent did they experience? What parent did they get? What model of their parents' marriage did they get? And that was for us. the bottom line
and
for us.
And it's winter roads in North Dakota.
That's true. If you're like in Florida, my goodness, you can just whip around as fast as you want. I remember that one year we had committed to go back home. We call it the east side of the state, see my family. And I have a picture of the roads we drove on. And we literally got there and I was like, this was so unwise. Like I get we held on our word, but those were the worst roads, some of the worst roads I've ever driven on.
And I think the tension we felt at one point too was like, well, when I think about my earliest childhood memories of Christmas, it's in my house by my Christmas tree. You know, and so at what point do you start to create that for your own children, like their memories in their own home, you know?
Yeah, and every family, we think you should pray and discern what that is. And so for us, just Christmas morning with our kids matters. And so even if we do travel, we'll say, hey, we can come as soon as we could leave is maybe 10.
We try to protect those early hours of Christmas morning.
Yeah, which could get complex and hard as we get older. And we're also not going to be rigid. Like, we've said that. But as our kids get older, their voice matters. Like if they're like, hey, we're fine with this, or let's bring our stockings to this, you know, family gathering or whatever.
Yeah, and I have great memories. I think it's not one way or the other. I have great memories growing up of having Christmas in our house and then jumping in the car and driving to South Dakota, you know,
yeah, because you didn't have to drive.
Yeah, I just rode along.
Great memories. It was probably where you didn't even have to be buckled.
I don't
you got
have
to run around the car.
any idea what my parents' experience was.
That's so true. And that's what I think we're going to have to work to understand our kids' generation and the stresses that they face that we never faced.
Yeah.
There is a technological side that our kids are going to face that I will never understand. And I think our generation, we're getting more done than we ever have.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, I'm sorry, but my parents, they went and shopped at grocery stores in person. I don't even do that anymore. And I save hours of time that I'm doing other things with. Like, our lives it's just the nature. I think the next generation, our generation, is fighting that. That's why people are like homesteading and going off the grid because they're sick of it. They're sick of the full life. But I think that's another part where this generation of young families is just trying to be really intentional. But they're just juggling a lot. Like there's just a lot because you have a greater capacity due to the tools we've been given to do more. Doesn't mean you have to, but yeah. Sorry, are we even on what we wanted to talk about?
Well, I think we should jump lastly to just the tension at the table.
I'm just going to hit on a couple things with adding seats to the table. Okay. And I'm just saying from experience, and I'm saying actually not mostly from my experience, from talking to a ton of people who've been in this scenario. If you are a parent who has experienced divorce, that's complex. And I get in most cases, some cases it was mutual. In some cases, someone literally, I'm quoting someone that said to me, my husband chose to blow up our marriage. I mean, like literally made detrimental decisions. And my life as I knew it was blew up in front of me. I get that. For some of you, it was your choice. For some of you, it wasn't your choice. I don't think anyone gets married with the intention of getting divorced. I don't know. I mean, you'd have to be a con artist to do that. And so the intention started out well. But if you have experienced divorce, I would just go as far to say, when it comes to family gatherings, especially if you have kids, if you're dating someone, for the sake, I will stand in the gap for your children and say, please do not bring your boyfriend or girlfriend to your family gathering. Like, please do not put someone in your family photos that is not in your family by covenant.
Is there a period of time where that changes?
How so?
Like, what if they've been with this person 2 years, or they're engaged, or they got divorced 5 years ago?
It's a little different. I'm talking specifically if you have kids and you've been divorced, whatever. In your own families, make up your own rules. I know there are some families where, like, if no boyfriends or girlfriends are coming to Christmas things, like, this is family, and once they're family, they can come, whatever. That, you can make your own rules. I'm saying, for the sake of your children at that gathering, protect them in that. And it's hard because the kids, and I've talked to so many kids of divorce, and all of them are saying, I didn't choose this. But I'm here at 38 And I'm still navigating this tension where my parent got to go fall in love again and move on and build XYZ. And I'm quoting people who have talked to me about this.
What does he say in the book? He says, falling in love again is easy. Blending it all together is very difficult.
Very difficult. And it's really easy to say, well, you should feel this way, or you should just accept this. That's easy to say when you're the one in love and married again. Like, you have to journey with your kids on it. And I'm more thinking of kids who are dependent still at home.
Well, and I think there are legit reasons that people get divorced. It's not like everybody who chose that path chose it because they were unsatisfied and searching for something better. Like, we get that it's complicated, but still.
We believe in biblical findings for divorce. We are those people. And if someone's considering it, we're going to say, and you should hear from both sides of, is it the biblical reason for it? So I'm just saying, and I'm sorry, but the other thing, if you're going through a divorce, do not send your child who's still at home to a counselor when you're the one going through a divorce, if you're not going to a counselor. Like, I've seen that far too many times. Oh, we're going through a divorce. My 14-year-old's acting out. Well, of course they are. You just blew up their whole world. Don't sit and don't go to a counselor and send your 14-year-old to a counselor. I've actually seen that too many times to count. I'm not saying counselors are bad.
People think, like, I can navigate my own emotions and my own feelings, but my kid doesn't have the emotional maturity to be able to navigate it, so I'm going to put them in counseling.
1,000%. And I get that. I get the reason. I see both sides of it. But I also have seen and lived and talked to people who have lived this, but the child's perspective is, you're putting me to a counselor when you couldn't figure your crap out?
Yeah.
What? So I'm just saying.
I think you're legit in everything you're saying. I'm just trying to give the opposite thought.
And I think, and I'll come strongly on these because most kids who are in that spot, they don't get to speak for themselves in that. They're never given an opportunity to speak to it, or it's written off that they're just not processing this well. I mean, in our first year of marriage, we had 2 18-year-olds on our doorstep whose worlds got blown up because their parents were like, oh, they're 18, they left the house. Oh, and now it's safe for us to get a divorce and they can handle it.
Yeah,
no
and I don't
kid
think,
is ready to handle that.
I don't think they were that flippant about it. I think their parents held on for the sake of the kid. And then once they graduated, it was like, okay, we're going to let them know.
The weave that I just did got back to the point of what I started, is where you said, if our kids choose that, we're going to the beach. Okay? Yes. Because I stinking love you. And my quote in marriage is, I keep saying, these kids are getting in the way of us. Yikes. Because I am committed that is going to be my mindset and that is going to be my position. Not, oh my goodness, I'm shifting my attention away from my...
That's such an interesting thought, because some of the pressure that parents are putting on their adult children is because they're unsatisfied in their relationships.
Because thinking about being on Christmas Day with just you and your spouse sounds miserable. Well, that's a marriage problem, not a kid problem.
Right.
Like, I think we will have a blast together. Mm-hmm. I hope. Mm-hmm. Right? So if you can peel back all the layers of the onion, that's a pretty deep layer of...
That's so interesting.
Oh my goodness. And to us, it's like, if it's just me and you, that make me so happy. I would 1,000% miss my kids. I would 1,000% miss my grandkids. But it should be, I said yes to you. And it was beautiful when it was just us. I cried when we were first pregnant. It was sooner than we thought. But I just said, I thought you and I would have more time. It's never going to just be you and I again until they leave the house. Yeah. And we should grieve that, because that's the whole goal, is we join with our spouse. So I do think some of the tension around holidays is like, if some people would just like get back to enjoying their spouse and not put so much on like, we need the kids to enjoy this. It should be like, if I'm just with my spouse, it's gonna be great because I love my spouse. And if our kids are added, oh my goodness, added blessing, like so fun.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking of the comment.
Another added blessing. Yeah.
I'm thinking of the comment I made at the beginning about like having the dining room table together, the family. And I'm thinking about us in our dream book, and I'm like, man, what if we downsize?
Oh.
At that point in our lives and use that resource to take everybody to the beach. Because maybe our kids won't have the resource when they're trying to raise 3 little kids to be able to even go on a vacation.
And I think we've already talked about that. We're going to be those parents. We're never going to be a parent that follows our kids. We would love to be close to our kids, but it's not going to be like, our kids have moved here. Maybe if the Lord would initiate that. But
I mean,
it's
if
like,
they're in the
it's our
Florida
calling.
Keys, we need to
Josh should be like, we're coming. We're there in 2 seconds. But we just talked about, man, if I want to know what the priority is to my kids. And so, again, our kids are 8, 6, and 3. Maybe you're like, you're not there yet. We're not. But I'm going to have this recording to go back and listen to when I'm 55, you know. Yeah. Josh and I stick pretty strongly to our convictions. But we've already started our dream book. We wrote to ourselves, you know, what to remember when our kids are adults. But we've talked about...
And we will have a critical moment in our lives where we sit down with our kids and we say, tell us how we failed. Tell us how we missed the mark. Tell us the ways that we harmed you that we didn't know it. Yep. And we will receive that and try to receive it with grace.
And that idea is not original to us. We have mentors that have taught us, and they have beautiful relationship with their adult children. And we've said, how can we learn from you? We know you're not perfect, but how can we learn from you? And one said, we did the best we could. We've been believers the whole time we've parented. But we know that we did things with great intentions that harmed our kids. Mm-hmm. And we allowed them as adults. They sat them around and they just said, hey, we're opening the floor. We know we did our absolute best, but our best wasn't maybe always the best for you. And so we wanted to give you space to voice. Obviously, they've built relationship with their kids leading up to this point, and their kids were open to like, hey, yeah, you did this, or you had this phrase, or you, and they didn't, but they cultivated their hearts,
yeah,
you know, to be ready for that.
Defensive,
and they had positioned themselves to not and to receive it and to acknowledge. And they created this moment of reconciliation of past things that could have just lingered and probably would have moved on just fine. But they talked about how strong the relationship with their adult children just grew. It just grew. But we've said, we want to know what's important to our kids. Like, let's say we do have the house that we've like loved and dream of, and it's like the childhood home. If that's not a huge value for our kids, and if they're building their lives elsewhere, and for them like traveling home isn't this like huge deal, well then yeah, we would be people that would pray like, hey, is downsizing the best thing to open up our resources so we can travel to them more, so we can provide these opportunities. So I think but I think also when you're living upside down and your roots are in heaven and you realize you're just a foreigner right here, you're not going to cling to those things so much. But we both come from families, though, where it's like the family farm. Like, that's a huge deal.
That's a
ginormous deal. Yeah. So we don't have the family farm.
Right.
we just bought a random house where we're at.
Right.
So, okay, sorry.
We're
already at 30 minutes.
Yeah, we're not going to get to everything that we wanted to today. I need to leave now.
Exactly now? Yes. Or in 7 minutes?
I need to leave now. We are not going to get to everything that we wanted to get to today, but a lot of it is navigated in the book. I will say that is not our copy of the book. We forgot ours at home, and we asked a couple of people on staff if anybody had one, and the person that said, yeah, I have that book at home, I was like, of course you do.
Yes.
Because I see them navigating this whole conversation with their kids already with such grace and wisdom.
They're adult children. And they're two of 3 are adults now.
Yeah, and they're being proactive. They've clearly embraced letting those kids go from into adulthood and embracing them as adults, not keeping them as children. And so just shout out to them.
Okay,
but
we didn't get to the talk of the table, which that really was going to be about when good old habits are on the table of family of origin, or that one offense or that one joke or jab.
Yep. Which or really is a conversation about...
you come from a family of critical spirits and they just love to be critical about everyone else. And if you choose to live for Jesus and let your mouth honor him, you're going to be the odd one out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we wanted to delve into. Okay, what's your one thought as I let you go to your meeting and I can wrap it up?
It's really a conversation about boundaries. And we've covered boundaries on the podcast before, but it's making a decision of, and I always think about this. I had to do this last week. It was not easy for me, but there was a conversation happening where I thought they're treading now on my values and on my convictions. And I have to say, here's where the line is with me. Mm-hmm. Like, this is who I am and what
particularly about how you speak.
Yeah. And what I will stand for and what I won't. And it's going to create tension, but I'm going to be able to live with myself. Because I created a boundary. And
you did it. This is where we have been learning boundaries for so long. And you downplayed that example right there. But I'm like, these are people you're close with. Mm-hmm. You did it. You wrestled with it privately to me and with the Lord. And you navigated it nonchalantly and with grace and communicating love for them and just saying, hey, but this is my conviction in this. So I'm not going to say that, or I'm not going to join in with that.
I had a situation at a family holiday where there was something being joked about at the expense of another person. I voiced.
Josh is not getting emotional. He just has acid reflux
from my coffee. But I voiced that I didn't approve of the conversation and I disagreed with how it was being handled. And I got frustrated.
How did you do that, Josh? How did you do that? Like,
I'm
actually
trying to remember
moment.
the first.
Because you say that.
Oh, because I think I directly said at the beginning of the conversation, I don't think this is funny because X, Y, Z. And I directly said it. It continued to be a joke while I was sitting at the table, and I finally stood up and just walked away from the table.
You stood up calmly.
I didn't yell at the person, throw a fit.
Didn't thrust the chair back and stand. No, you just stood up calmly like you had to go to the bathroom.
Walked to the kitchen like I was getting more food. Yep. And you might think, well, did you just avoid the conversation? Well, the person that was instigating it about 10 minutes later came up to me and was right here in my face and said, "What's wrong, Josh? What's wrong?
Well,
what's the
those
problem?"
of you watching on YouTube or not, or just listening,
they were poking me in the chest, literally. And I'm like, so they got the message that I didn't approve, even though I didn't have to say anything. I just got up and.
But okay, so we say boundaries when really, if you're allowing, are you you're going to sneak out and you're going to let me close?
Got it from here.
I'm just going to close. Okay, I'll do my best. I love you. Bye. This is where we know we've gotten to in the podcast. We're just rolling with it. Which Josh did rearrange his schedule to make these podcasts work. So incredibly gracious and kind of him. When we say boundaries, I think sometimes that can be taken, it can be taken so wrong. It has been used really wrong. But like what Josh just explained there is really just, he's had a difference in maturing of how he wants to communicate when he disagrees and when he's not going to bridge certain conversation or he's not going to just joke around something that's actually serious. And so you can use the word boundaries, but sometimes it just means how I've grown and how the Lord shaped me and changed me. And sometimes that won't fit into the mold of what has been normal socially in your family setting. And so, particularly for us, foul language, coarse joking, and particularly sarcasm, which we don't say, and we discussed this before the podcast, so I'm not sharing anything Josh wouldn't, but we just have decided in our family unit that sarcasm is just not a value. It's not, we have never seen it bring life to the fullest as Jesus described in scripture. And so Josh was and can be sarcastic and joking. And so when we choose to not participate in that, it doesn't mean us saying, oh, I'm not going to say that or have to put up a boundary or say something. Sometimes it just means that we don't participate, or sometimes it means, you go up and you get another plate of food, or you're going to choose not to talk around an issue, or you're going to choose to not talk about another family member or joke at their expense, whether they're at the table or not at the table. And so it's so interesting because we did that message in November, I was going to say a couple weeks ago. And I, on Thanksgiving or before, got a text from a friend, and she might be listening, but she just said, thank you so much. I just said, hope you have a great holiday. And she said, yep, gonna go to so-and-so's house and gonna try really navigate not getting into the maybe critical conversation or toxic conversation around the table, or try to allow, really, if you're in that scenario and you enter into family settings, doesn't have to be family. Maybe it's your work Christmas party. Maybe it's your friends get together and you're trying to serve Jesus. You need to pray Psalm 141:3, which the paraphrase version is, be the gatekeeper of my mouth, O Lord. And so the Holy Spirit will help you to know when to speak, when to not speak. And some believers would say you always have to stand, you always have to say something. Well, we don't see that modeled in Jesus' life. It says, like a sheep that went to the slaughter, he went without a word. And so your lack of words can carry power, your conduct, and when you choose to respond, your actions, it all is powerful and it all speaks. And so we hope this has been beneficial to you. I wish we could get into boundaries. The books we recommend on that, my goodness, Henry Cloud has so many good resources. Good Boundaries and Goodbyes by Lisa TerKeurst is a really good book. She actually has scripts. Like literally, she does a script if it's like Uncle Joe who loves to share his political views that he knows are different than yours, but just kind of likes to get a rise out of you. Literally, she gives a script of how to do a loving boundary, and it's usually not to punish the other person. It's to preserve love between your relationship. So she has some good resources on that. So if this is beneficial to you or you think it would benefit someone else, share, rate, subscribe, all that fun podcast stuff, and we will see you at our next episode. Thanks, guys.